If your creative push has helped you, you can help out the show by shopping on Amazon.com. All you have to do is head to yourcreativepush.com/Amazon. That will take you right there and you can shop how you normally would. A small percentage of your purchases will go directly to helping cover the costs of creating, hosting, and maintaining your creative push. And you can make a big difference just by buying the things that you're going to anyway. Again, that's yourcreativepush.com/Amazon, and thank you for thinking of the show and for helping out. Your Creative Push, episode 198.
When you're trying to build a career, it's almost like you're a superhero, kind of like you have a secret identity that's your day job, and then at night you put on your costume and do your thing.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Clark Huggins. Clark is a visual artist who combines imagery from his 13 years of experience as a theater actor with his lifelong love of fantasy, science fiction, and comics. In addition to his personal work, he has worked on several tabletop gaming properties, including Android Netrunner, Call of the CTHULHU, and Star Wars. His work has appeared in Spectrum, ImagineFX Magazine, and Infected by Art. Clark also works as a professional storyboard artist for film and television production, and has worked on such television series as True Blood, Damages, and American Horror Story. He is also the creator of Reckless Deck, an idea-generating card deck for artists looking to jumpstart their creativity. Clark, that's a lot going on, but before we get into Reckless Deck and all of the other things that you do, I was wondering if you could kind of give us a brief summary, a kind of creative summary of how you got to this point you are today in your career.
Sure. It's funny because I started as an illustrator as a kid. You know, that was like my thing. I would draw stuff. And then, I did some theater in high school, like you do, like drama club or whatever in high school. But really went to college for illustration and ended up having to leave Syracuse due to like family financial stuff in the middle of my when I was about to start my junior year. So I moved to California because it was just more affordable to finish school there. And I started to do theater again just as a way to kind of meet people and get involved. And the theater kind of wooed me away. Like I ended up kind of joining the circus a little bit. And left illustration and then pursued acting full time for like 13 years and moved back to New York as a professional actor. I went to grad school for my acting degree and got out of grad school back to New York and was like, I can't wait another table. If I continue to wait tables, I'm going to blow my brains out. Like I was that guy that had that job that was soul sucking and awful and I just couldn't take it anymore. So I was trying to find a way to make illustration do something for me financially, which is like a hilarious thing because like who would do that? Who would actually like, oh, I know how I'm going to make money. I'm going to draw stuff.
Right.
But I ended up looking into storyboarding as a thing and ended up submitting my work to some advertising agencies in the city and got a meeting at Ogilvy and Mather with a guy who was then my mentor and became my studio head and mentor, who hired me, and I started to work as a storyboard artist for advertising. And that really enabled me to get out of the waiting tables rut. And then as I was pursuing a career both as an actor and as an illustrator simultaneously, for every kind of like kick to the gut that acting would give me as a New York actor, there would be a new great opportunity as an illustrator. Something really wonderful would happen or a great door would open up. And finally I just, decided to kind of go with that and to get swept up in the current of becoming an illustrator again.
Yeah, and there's no looking back since then?
There have been some moments of looking back, and every time I've kind of tried to, like, dip my toe back in the water of the professional acting world, it's been a little bit more like sticking your hand in a fan. So, and every time I do that, I'm like, oh, that's why I don't do this anymore. Okay.
Right.
So at this point, I feel like I'm more interested in doing some artwork that has some kind of a narrative quality to it. A series of paintings or a graphic novel. That's something that's a possibility. Is doing that kind of work, or just writing, as opposed to actually wanting to get up and perform anymore. I can't really say that I feel that urge the way I used to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, that story that you hear all the time from actors, it's just like so hard to make it. And I think another thing with, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but the other thing about being able to illustrate is it's like your own thing, you know, it's like that thing that you kind of create from out of nothing.
Yes, unless you're independently wealthy and can afford to produce your own theater or make your own films,
right.
you as an actor, you're very beholden to other people to give you the opportunity to do your thing. And acting, at home in your living room on a Friday night is ridiculous. Like, that's not a real thing. Whereas staying home on a Friday night and painting a painting is very much a real thing. So I definitely feel like it is an art form that you have more, you have a little bit more control over when you do it and how you do it and how much you do it.
Now, when you were doing storyboards, was that kind of like a transition into, like we were talking about, doing something for somebody else as a transition into doing stuff for yourself?
I mean, I still do advertising work all the time. It definitely is my main source of income still. So it's something I'm still doing every day, and I've got a bunch more to do tonight. So it's, I definitely don't feel like I've transitioned out of doing the storyboard illustration. It's been great for me as a place to do my own personal art and to pursue the fantasy and science fiction stuff, which I love. And it's given me the ability to have to draw every day as a job, first of all, and also a certain legitimacy as a full-time illustrator that you don't have if you are, pushing your portfolio around and you work at Starbucks or you work at a movie theater or you wait tables, that kind of thing. So it's still a part of my life. I'd like to see a little bit more balance, which is what I'm kind of striving for right now in terms of trying to balance out the advertising work or the storyboarding work with, comic book work or game card art, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say has been like the biggest lesson you've learned from trying to balance? Because I think a lot of people do try to, first of all, they do have that kind of imbalance in their professional job, how they make money. Like me, for example, it's not creative at all. With their kind of creative passion, it's really cool to find that kind of a job, like you said, with the storyboarding, where you can draw every day and still kind of work on your craft as you're making money. What have you found is to be like good advice for people that have a difficult time making that kind of balance?
That you're not alone, really. Like it's always a difficult balance, and that doesn't go away. Even professional people at the top of the illustration field are still taking jobs that pay well versus jobs that they love. You're always going to be kind of like weaving back and forth between like, oh, this is like a really great gig. It's going to pay me really well versus this is not going to pay me much at all, but it's a passion project. So all I can say is, be smart about how you handle your finances so that you can give yourself those little pockets of you, and then use your time well. Like when you have downtime, make sure that you're productive. Don't say, oh, I had a really long work week, so I'm going to, go out and blow all my money and stay out until 3:00 in the morning because I deserve it. When you're trying to build a career, from some kind of art form, it's almost like you're a superhero, kind of like you have a secret identity that's your day job, and then at night you put on your costume and do your thing. And you have to have the discipline to be that guy as opposed to the one who goes out all night or sits at home and does nothing or plugs into their Xbox or their PlayStation for 5 hours.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I like that idea of a superhero. I think that kind of personal identity is a good one to have, like that positive thing where you're going towards something. And I do agree that, saying, oh, I had a long week, I worked so hard, I deserve to unwind and go out to the bar and blow all my money or stay out all night, or, I deserve to just unplug and go into play Xbox for 5 hours and just kind of turn my mind off. Yeah, maybe you do deserve that, but you also deserve, like, your future self deserves, like, you building this, like, kind of passion for yourself, this career for yourself, this body of work for yourself, so that later on is when you get to, like, kind of reap those benefits.
Yes, and I also feel like, if there's an extension of that piece of advice is, kind of be smart about what you're building towards, try to have a shape to the work that you're working on and then get it out there and go. And I can only speak as an illustrator from my field, like go to conventions and show your work to art directors and show your work to other illustrators and get it out there, get a table at a convention and put your work out there. because if you do the work and then you don't put it out there, it's not going to help you.
Absolutely. Now, with your personal work, or even with when you're creating for other people, when it comes down to actually, sitting down and creating something, do you have any kind of resistances, any type of things that hold you back?
I used to. I really used to. I don't really feel like I do anymore. When I was younger, I actually found, and this, speaks a lot to how I ended up in the theater. I found the isolation and the solitude of visual art really uncomfortable. I really didn't enjoy it, and I actually felt in a lot of ways that it was kind of intolerable to me to spend that much time alone and just working on my art. And I found it very hard to do it, and to do it regularly, and to really allow myself to fall into that zone and just be alone for that much time. And so I went the complete opposite direction, and went and joined the theater. Now I like it. Now I feel like that's something that was true then and isn't really as true at all now. I also feel like I had ideas for pieces when I was younger, and I didn't have the actual craftsmanship or the knowledge of process to know how to execute them. And that was extremely frustrating. When I would actually try to execute these things that required more preliminary work, more preliminary drawing, more photography, more reference taking, more sketching in the beginning. And I would just try to, kind of attack the canvas in this sort of very romantic kind of way, but actually really ineffective kind of way. And I wouldn't get anywhere near where I wanted to be with it. And that was very, very frustrating.
You said attacking the canvas. So what was it was it just practice that made you be able to kind of approach it in a more smart way?
Well, it wasn't really until I actually took the illustration masterclass that you read in that ridiculously long bio of mine that I started to really see, I think that's when for the first time, I was storyboarding. I'd been storyboarding for about 2 years at that point, or maybe a year and a half. My financial situation had really leveled off as a result of doing the full-time storyboarding work. And I wanted to do something to reinvest in my illustration. So I found an ad in Imagine FX magazine for this masterclass, and I didn't know any of the names associated with who the teachers were. I just decided to give a shot, and if it was terrible, it was terrible, and if it was great, it was great. And it turns out that the people who did teach and who still do teach at the IMC are some of the most top tier illustrators in the field. Really kind of legendary illustrators, like Gennaro Giancola and Boris Vallejo and Greg Manches. And these are all people now who I've come to know in the past, 6 or 7 years, and who I've studied with numerous times, and I consider to be really good friends and great mentors. But at the time, when I walked in there the first time and saw their body of work, I think that was the first time I got to see that, all these different kinds of illustrations that I see here and there in the world that I'm really drawn to actually exist under one umbrella as an industry. And I don't think I ever really sort of put that together before. And then once we got involved in the week-long training, I got a lot of exposure to how much kind of pre-production goes into any given painting. All those guys are really nailing down their composition through numerous sketches ahead of time, doing a lot of online referencing of what things really look like, and a lot of looking through books for inspiration, a lot of photographing their own reference of if they've got figures in their painting, which all those painters are figurative painters, they costume their model, they light their model, they shoot their model in the exact pose. And it's not just here's a pose that's kind of like the pose I want to do. They shoot the exact pose that they're going to paint from, and they use that photo or some kind of photoshopped combination of that photo as their guide to paint that painting. And so there's a lot of technique that I didn't really know at the time, that once I had that and was able to start working with those tools, the painting started to come together a lot more, a lot better. There was a lot less frustration, a lot less spinning my wheels, and a lot less kind of starting over. And because there was this kind of foundation, there was this scaffolding or armature of process about how to not fall on your face when you are trying to execute a complex painting.
That makes a lot of sense. It's, you don't know what you don't know. So
exactly. And, I think that people believe a lot of dumb things about visual art, in terms of like how to do it and where it comes from. And, the idea that it is this kind of like Lord Byron infused like opium frenzy is kind of preposterous, and it's not very useful. It's not really helpful to people who are just starting out or who want to make these really cool paintings. It's laborious, and there's some very nuts and bolts craftsmanship that you do in order to make it look great. And that's not the kind of American artist romantic bohemian ideal, but that's how you do it and have it work out right.
Yeah, it's not, like you said before, it's not as romantic as just kind of, walking up to the canvas or whatever your kind of
and then like
are.
Entering this kind of fugue state, and then like 17 hours later having this like amazing figurative painting. That's just not true.
Right. And I think that can happen though. Like you can get in those flow states, but there's so much work that is like so much further down. Once you have those kind of technical skills that you can kind of turn it off. But you do have to like learn, different ways of kind of approaching it if you have a difficult time, or if your hands have like a difficult time making what, you kind of have in your head.
Yeah. Yes. I think that you can. There are those moments of like you really kind of can get cooking as you can have those painting sessions that feel great and are really fun, but you get to them by having laid out all this groundwork that supports you finally getting there. You don't just go buy a canvas at the art store, bring it home, and like start slapping paint on it, because you're not gonna. At least as a figurative painter, you're gonna be frustrated. And if you are one of those people, and you're finding that that's what you're doing, and you're frustrated with what you're getting, that's okay. That's probably a good reason for that. It's not you. It's just that you're not taking the steps. You're trying to, not only are you trying to run before you can walk, you're trying to fly before you can walk.
Yeah. I mean, even though you're a superhero,
right.
You still gotta learn how to fly.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think people also have not just that kind of technical block, but some people have that kind of creative block too, where they can't get an idea in their head. Like they can't get that idea. Like they're just kind of in a block like that. And I think that's where Reckless Deck comes in to play for people. Yeah, exactly. I created Reckless Deck as a tool for myself. Not really out of being blocked, but also actually at a time of intense creativity where my time was very limited, and I really wanted to make the most of the moments that I was able to actually spend in front of the canvas. I wanted to spend my time practicing painting or practicing drawing and being in that zone that we just talked about, as opposed to scratching my head for, half an hour or 45 minutes about what I should be working on in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I started to, and I had all this figure reference from from hiring models or having friends pose for me from previous paintings. Some really fun stuff that I wanted to make something out of. And I was like, how can I quickly and expediently get something rolling in terms of like something fantastic and like conceptual that I can apply to this figure reference, and then just get moving, mm-hmm. instead of spending all this time trying to figure out what it is. And then once I figure it out, then there goes my window of opportunity, my painting time. Hey, can you explain what Reckless Deck is for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically like an idea generating card deck that takes all of the tropes, or a lot of the tropes that you see repeatedly in fantasy and science fiction, and also comics, horror, and steampunk. And, basically I assign each one a card, like all those iconic things that you see in the Star Wars movies, mm-hmm. laser guns and gun belts and lightsabers, though I can't call them lightsabers in my deck, or George Lucas would sue me. But also the things that you see in the fantasy tropes of like the crown, the robes, the swords and the shields and all that stuff. And in steampunk, would be top hats and hoop skirts and parasols and what I found once I made I start to see all of these different genres that, that I love and that we all love, as lovers of sci-fi and fantasy as almost like a language almost, and each of those things become little bits of information, and I would assign them each a card and then shuffle the deck. And the deck then kind of slammed all of these genres together in this crazy way. And I found that the weird combinations of, if I were to deal myself a hand of 3 or 4 cards, the weirdness of the fantasy items jammed right up against the steampunk item, up against the sci-fi item, really was exciting. I felt like I was kind of getting away with something, and I was like breaking some rules. I was like, those things don't belong together. But once you allow yourself to say, well, what if they did? What if they did belong together? How would that look? And I found that the combinations led me to some very bizarre and really unique creative places, and I found that very, very exciting when I first made the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the deck in my hands right now, and of course, when you said lightsaber, I landed on laser sword. Right. So I see what you did there. But
yeah, it's not my favorite wording in the world, but as much as I'd love to say lightsaber because it is so iconic, I just can't.
I got you. But I like what you're talking about because it kind of. Like coming up with those combinations and then being like, oh, this is like interesting. Like I can't do that. Like these don't belong together. It's like the cards then give you kind of permission to do it.
There is a permissiveness to the cards, and I think that is why we called it Reckless Deck, because I wanted it to inspire a certain bravado. To really let you off the hook in terms of second guessing yourself, or a timidity about it, or preciousness of approaching the paper, and just be willing to make a mess, be willing to put things together that don't belong together, and enjoy the experience of making something rather than worrying about if it's right or if it's good enough or whether you should be doing it or not. The deck is meant to inspire leaping before you look.
I like that. Yeah, and it's not just like permission, it's just like permission to try. And I think a lot of people get stuck on that. They're like, oh, this doesn't seem like it should exist. It's like, all right, well just create it and see what happens. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and a lot of it's like, wow, that's such a terrible idea. Like, that's gonna be nothing but awful. So I can't, there's really no stakes. And then you find out once you work on it that it actually wasn't awful, that it's actually what you made is pretty cool.
Absolutely. So can you talk a little bit about the Kickstarter journey with Reckless Deck?
Sure. Yeah, we are approaching our second attempt on Kickstarter to fund the Volume 2 version of Reckless Deck, and that'll be on March 20th. But this is, again, our second attempt. We tried to fund it in the fall, and it didn't fund. And that was very, very, very frustrating. But I learned a lot about Kickstarter and about how, you can have a really good idea, but you have to really hit all the right notes in terms of Kickstarter as a little universe, because there are definitely things that do and don't work on Kickstarter. So, with this second attempt at this Kickstarter, I tried to do too much. I had all these really neat ideas as to how to expand Reckless Deck from just a single deck into kind of like a suite of products, where you can get this or you can get this, and you can combine it with the original Reckless Deck, and you can put some new cards in, take some old cards out, and really kind of continually customize your deck so that it's best for you, so that it's loaded only with cards that you like. And it would be different from what somebody else would put together. But the messaging of trying to do too much at once got really, I think, confusing for people. And it then set us up with a really high funding goal, because I put us in a position for us to have to do all of that at once, when I realized, well, even if we do a third of this, that's still better than having done none of it. So, why not take a smaller bite and have a much smaller funding goal and hit a sense of success a lot sooner, and then hopefully draw some people in to help to start to unlock some stretch goals and start to really fund new ideas that way. After you hit the funding goal of your Kickstarter, then you can continue to fund. And that's where, I mean, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Kickstarter as a platform, but, that's why people set their campaigns up with these stretch goals that unlock after the initial funding goal has been met to keep people coming on board and to fund more, but then to open up new possibilities of how to make your project better or how to include more in it for the backers. So this, smaller upfront approach, I think, is a much smarter way to go about it. I'm sorry that I had to learn that lesson in such a really, not really painful way, but very frustrating and very time consuming. Doing a Kickstarter is a lot of work, and I'm finding that I'm having to dig deep the second time around in order to, the sort of, it wasn't as fun. It's fun now, now that we're getting really close to actually having it launch again. It's fun, but, digging back in to replan another Kickstarter took a lot of discipline. I had to dig pretty deep for that.
Yeah, and congrats to you for not just like throwing in the towel, for trying it again and taking the lessons that you learned from the first time and trying it again. March, you said?
Yes, March 20th.
Very cool. And where can people get to that?
There will be a direct link when it goes live at recklessdeckcampaign.com. Recklessdeck.com is the website for the product itself, and then there's a landing site, like a launch site, that is Reckless Deck Campaign, where people can add their email address if they want to enter a contest or get alerts about the Kickstarter and that kind of thing. But okay. That's probably the most direct link to the Kickstarter.
Very cool. We'll have that linked up at yourcreativepush.com/Clark Huggins as well. So I don't know completely. I've never done a Kickstarter. So when something like that happens where you don't meet the goal, do you get to stay in contact with the people that were originally interested in? And how are you kind of maintaining contact with them to make sure that they're on board for the next go around?
A lot of them signed up for the same email opt-in that we just talked about. So I am communicating with them through newsletters, basically putting together Reckless Deck newsletters. And also a lot of those people now follow me on social media. And so I've begun, the process of the pre-advertising campaign on social media, like on, Facebook and Instagram, posting some new artwork, letting people know that the new Kickstarter is starting.
Very cool. Were there any other lessons that you learned from kind of this whole endeavor? I
definitely would say, I want to be as encouraging as possible for people to pursue the thing that they, that thing that they have in mind. Like, if you have an idea, like, you definitely want to get it out there. And I do think that a forum like Indiegogo or Kickstarter is a great way to, it's a lot of work, but it's a great way to put your product out into the world without leveraging yourself, to a really bad financial place. But just be prepared for the amount of work that it's going to be, and ask yourself. I was able to find out, because we didn't kickstart the first Reckless Deck. My wife and I just funded it. We could do it. So we just were like, why don't we just do it? And we were able to really see that people were interested in it. So heading into this Kickstarter, I feel like we've had 2 years with the first Reckless Deck out in the world, and it's performed consistently well enough that I feel good and confident that it's something people like, and that the Volume 2 is something that people really want and will be interested in. But it's a good idea to have that ability to float your idea out there in a somewhat safe way first, if you can, to get feedback from other people and potential consumers. And then if you do decide to go the crowdfunding route, like, just start way ahead of time and be ready for the amount of the amount of emailing and admin work that's going to bring into your life. I didn't realize quite how much admin work there was going to be involved, and now I'm finding that, like, wow, I'm really spending a lot of time, like, sending emails and typing stuff on the computer instead of at my easel. But I think that it's temporary. I think that once we get the Kickstarter going, and then feel pretty confident that we're going to fund this time based on the changes that we've made, I think it'll be worth it. I think it'll be really great to bring the Volume 2 into the world and into the marketplace where people can get it. I created the Volume 2 just because the Volume 1 was the first deck that I made. That was that was the first one that I started to use when I was using it just for myself. And when we sent it to the printer, ideas for cool cards just kind of kept rolling on in. And I started keeping a spreadsheet of them. And I realized that the content that I had after having done the first Reckless deck was like so fun. You know, there were cards that I was just so excited about that, you know, that I then had in the spreadsheet that were not in the first volume, that I was like, you know, you got to go back. We got to do another one because there's just these are such fun cards.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about just really kind of planning it out. It's kind of like you were talking about with just like approaching the canvas. Like you can't just go at it and just go for it. You kind of have to like kind of learn some stuff before you just dive into it.
Totally.
And we talk a lot on the show about, you know, sometimes getting in over your head is a good thing, and to just kind of do it and learn later, you know what I mean? But I think with something like this, especially something that involves so much, it's good to really do your homework and just know that it's like taking on a second job, essentially.
Yes, it really is. And I think that maybe more so than I thought it was going to be. But it's too late now. You know, I'm in it now. I can't not follow through at this point. There's too much work that's already gone into it. But I am looking forward to a point where I can actually spend a lot more time doing the artwork and doing less of the admin stuff.
So as far as like comparing what you're doing with Reckless Deck with your work that you're doing now, like I imagine that right now you have a ton of stuff going on, like with this upcoming new Kickstarter. How are you kind of balancing that time? Like, what have you learned, and what kind of advice could you give to people that have multiple things going on that still want to get to their personal work?
Well, the one piece of information that you don't have in all of this is that my wife and I also have a 21-month-old son.
Oh.
And that is like,
nice.
There is no balance. You know, I feel like everything that's happening right now is all kind of opportunity based.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you just grab your time when you can and you try to be as productive as you possibly can be until you have to get up and do something for your son, you know, or until the phone rings or until you've got to switch gears, and be ready to switch gears all the time. You know, if you have a window of opportunity to work on something, be ready to work on it. You can't say, oh, I'm not in the mood to do that, or I don't feel inspired. Time becomes so precious when you have a lot going on, and then you add to that, like, being a dad, that you have to take, when you have time, you have to use it, and be prepared to use your whole day. You know, I might take a tiny bit of time at the end of the day to unwind, but my workday does not stop at 5 or 6 o'clock.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's important to have those goals always in mind, like the end goal always in mind, and what you're doing this for, and make sure it's worth it. You know what I mean? Because that's the only thing that's going to really be able to get you through when you have an hour, you know, one free hour of your day, instead of just unwinding, to actually spend it wisely as most productively as you can. And just get to it.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I keep a lot of lists because things get forgotten, things get lost. So, you know, I have notebooks full of to-do lists.
It's important because then you can kind of cross it off of your mind as well.
Yeah, and with the satisfaction of being able to actually physically cross something out is very therapeutic.
Yeah, absolutely. You feel like you're actually making progress.
Yep.
Clark, man, this has been awesome, but it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach to the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best words of advice and really push them to pursue their creative passion.
Yeah, you know, actually I listened to your show a bunch heading into this, and I was prepared for this moment, and I tried to give that a little bit of like pre-thought and pre-planning. Mm-hmm. And really, I think that the most basic and I think the most urgent piece of advice that I can say is get comfortable with being stucky. Mm-hmm. You know, find a real warm spot in your heart and a real high tolerance for doing work that isn't that good. Even when you're working at a very high level professionally, there's a lot of, you know, sketching that is bad. There's a lot of ideas that are not good, but are leading you towards something that is good. And I think that for anybody to really improve, or for anybody to really achieve the level that they may dream of working at, either professionally or artistically, you have to really learn to tolerate doing work that you don't like and that you don't think is good and doesn't meet your standards of your aesthetic, and just hang out with that for a long time. I think in this field, or in these kinds of creative fields, it's really all about quantity. It's not really about these moments of like beautiful quality, like these precious gems. It's more about like dump trucks full of dirty dirt, and then like within there, then there are some precious gems. Now that's really the only way to get to the gems. They don't just drop out of the sky. So you have to really be willing to power through some work that is uncomfortable, and that's okay.
I love that analogy. Yeah. And it's so tough sometimes to trudge through that, but I think you're right. It's getting kind of cozy and comfortable and, familiar with that idea of, sucking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that the more you do it and the more you can get in a groove with that, it becomes something that's more kind of like, folding your laundry or doing sit-ups. It becomes just this kind of calisthenic, almost this routine thing that you do that doesn't have any, doesn't say anything about you. It's just you're doing your thing. You're doing your warm-ups. You're moving through your forms, kind of, and that will then lead you to start to get better. You'll find that if you're willing to just plow through being terrible for a while, there will be moments of being not terrible. And you kind of have to earn them.
Yeah, I love that idea. But yeah, I agree with you, but I disagree that, to not treat it like a chore though, like to enjoy folding the laundry, to enjoy that time that you're spending with it.
I mean, definitely, I didn't mean to compare it with something that maybe was like really onerous or that you hated doing.
I hate doing the laundry.
But maybe something that really just that was like more of a low stakes activity, as opposed to something that it doesn't need to say something about you every time you pick up a pencil and open up your sketchbook. It is okay to just do that, and for it to be frustrating and to not go well. Yeah,
take that pressure off of yourself.
Right.
Clark, man, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know how busy you are with everything going on, especially having a kid. So I really appreciate you carving out some time for us today to inspire us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And you can find Clark on his website, which is clarkhuggins.com, and definitely go to recklessdeck.com if you want to get volume 1, or if you want to kind of find out about volume 2 when it comes out in March. So that will all also be linked up at the show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Clark Huggins. Clark, thanks again, man.
My pleasure. Thanks again.
My thanks again to Clark for coming on the show. I think the thing I like the most about Reckless Deck is the permissiveness of the deck, like we were talking about in the show. And I think it's really important to find a way to give yourself permission to do something if you have trouble not only coming up with ideas, but struggling to put those ideas into creation because nobody else has before you. And if you can find a tool like Reckless Deck that gives you like a mandate to create something, I think you have found a really great tool. You can just say, the cards told me I had to do it, so I'm going to do it. And I think that's a really inspiring and encouraging thing to be able to do that, because to be able to put things together that don't belong together, in my opinion, that is what makes a great creative person, and especially a great writer or like a great comedian, is being able to connect two things that don't normally get connected. And I think those obscure connections are the most fun to make as well. And it sometimes takes practice, though, to kind of have the courage to be able to combine, to mash two things together that don't really normally seem like they should be mashed together. And I think it takes practice. So when you have an idea that comes into your head, but you immediately shun it or forget about it, perhaps you don't even realize that you're shunning it. You're doing it subconsciously because you've never seen it before. And in your mind, it just automatically thinks that it wouldn't work because you would have seen it before. I think that you should train yourself. You need to find a way to train yourself to embrace those ideas where you're like, I've never seen anybody make that combination before. And instead of thinking that it won't work, think that maybe it could work. And I'm not saying that you need to commit to fully developing this idea into something complete, but at least write it down. At least start to explore it. Perhaps you are the one that makes that first connection. And I mean, that is the whole point of being a creative person, right? To create new things, not just to create a carbon copy, a probably worse version of something that somebody else has already created. Creative people innovate. So innovate. If you get that idea, grab it, and at the very least, write it down and put a question mark after it, or put an ellipsis after it, and just start to explore that idea. I think that those are the most thrilling ideas to really chase. So really go for it. Continue to make those connections, make those ideas, and push them forward. Not all of them are going to work. And like Clark was saying in the episode, sometimes you have to work through dump trucks of dirt to find those gems, but just keep trying. Just keep playing. Just keep being reckless. That is all I've got for you today. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. And we will be back on Wednesday, a day early, with artist Agnieska Pilat, who is this really talented artist who explores time in her artwork in really, really interesting and unique ways. And it's a day early because she has a show starting on Friday, March 3rd, at the Gold Gallery in Boston. So we wanted to give you a couple extra days in case you're in that area or going to be in that area and want to check her out. We'll have her art linked at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/198. If you want to get links to not only her art, but to Gold Gallery in preparation for her episode, as I said, on Wednesday. If you're used to the Thursday routine, you can just wait a day and listen to it then. But we just wanted to give you a heads up in case you wanted to check out her show. But until then, I hope you get some amazing work done, and we will see you in a couple of days if you need the push again. I love you all. We'll see you then. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.